Okay, imagine this. You're playing a game you found while binging various YouTube Let's Players in 2019. It's late at night, but you have nothing better to do, so you play instead of sleeping. Suddenly, BAM! This thing jump scares you. Scary, right? No? Yeah, you're probably right, but it's the thought that counts. As you might be aware, that cardboard cutout jump scare comes from the game Spooky's House of Jump Scares, now called Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion, after a copyright dispute. The game was originally released on October 23, 2014, and developed by Akuma Kira and AMG Shina under Lag Studios, which will later split into Albino Moose Games and Kira LLC. It's fair to claim that Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion is an indie title, both because its initial debut was on IndieDB, but also because even at the peak of its popularity, it never amassed much more than a cult following. While a lot of horror games like to employ deceiving titles, the title of Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion is pretty much what you should expect from the game. The basic quest is this. Spooky, a mischievous ghost girl, haunts a spooky house on the hill. Based on the intro, it's a house riddled in mystery, and our main character, a history enthusiast, simply had to challenge its halls. Spooky defines our mission within practically the first 10 seconds of playing the game. Survive through 1,000 rooms of her mansion before she flies off screen. While this task may seem daunting, we learn pretty quickly that the rhythm of the game is fast. Rooms are small, and in combination with our stamina that replenishes with every room, can be traversed within seconds. You can go through 50 or so rooms in a matter of minutes. As a side note, that's a part of what I love about the game. Its pace can be determined by the player, with the lore, through the form of notes and computer entries around the mansion, an atmosphere for gamers that like a slower ride, as well as shortcuts and stamina mechanics for players that are looking for a speedrun. Anyway, while the game starts off pretty empty, traversing room after room after room, with the music of a lovely ambient soundtrack and cardboard jump scares every now and then that do get you on your first playthrough, the tension rises significantly and quickly upon reaching room 60. While technically we are introduced to our first specimen with the cardboard cutouts, specimen being how the game refers to its monsters, we meet our first mobile specimen, specimen 2, at room 60. A green, slimy poltergeist, specimen 2 instantly changes the mood of the game from spooky, chill, and honestly kind of boring to tense and frightening within a matter of seconds, at least on your first playthrough. His introduction is perfect, utilizing the note mechanic to initiate his chase, a classic trope of a note written in blood, before the sound of choking and labored breathing over a drum beat bombard your headphones, and Specimen 2 rises from a puddle of green slime like a twisted birth of Venus. Specimen 2 also establishes the pattern of the game. Every 50 to 100 rooms, a new specimen is introduced. Some only chase you within their designated levels, making for unique chase sequences and map layouts, but others, like Specimen 2, can spawn at random throughout the mansion. By room 500, you are pretty used to Specimen 2. While Specimen 2 is one of the more memorable specimens, you encounter plenty of specimens throughout the game. In the main game, there are 13 specimens, including the cardboard cutout in Specimen 2, and all of them have new mechanics that add some unique challenge to their chase sequences. Another thing to note is that a lot of the specimens are based on other horror franchises. For example, Specimen 5, who you meet in room 210, both with her lore and her design, is clearly inspired by the Silent Hill franchise and its monsters. Specimen 6 is a shameless redesign of the Ben Drowned creepypasta, and Specimen 13's map and mechanic are basically a free trial version of Amnesia. This component of the character design is a major part of the game's charm, but let me not get too ahead of myself. Saying it out loud, I admit, this game kind of sounds silly. Sure, the premise is fun, but the quality is lo-fi at best, the gameplay is repetitive, the horror is cheesy, and half of the main cast of characters are basically just copies of another artist's concept. I haven't even addressed the endless mode, where you can go through the exact guy from I'm Scared, Lisa from Silent Hill's PT, and Ready? What is the value in a clunky passion project like Spooky Jumpscare Mansion? Why should we care about it in an age of objectively better horror games like Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4? Oh, maybe that's why. While horror games have increased in quantity from 2014, can we really say that they have increased in quality? In a technical sense, of course. Horror games released after 2020 are the most realistic we've ever seen. The maps of games like Poppy Playtime are both expansive and photographic in terms of their realism. In comparison to Spooky's low-poly labyrinth of repeating rooms, Poppy Playtime trumps it. However, what I think is also clear in Poppy Playtime's quality is the impact of commercialization. Of course, commercialism is not a new concept in video games by any means. The majority of video games are made with the same expectations of a business. Profit correlates with engagement, so every new game has to be the next best thing, at least in regards to the graphics. In defense of realism, a part of what can make a horror game so terrifying is its ability to immerse the player, and realism does this extremely effectively. You can practically smell the gore and viscera in Resident Evil Requiem as an example. Being able to immerse the player makes classic tropes like jump scares all the more effective. However, I would argue that for many games, this increase in graphics quality comes at the sacrifice in the quality of storytelling. When the focus is a game's realism, a game's ability to immerse, a game's ability to outdo the realism of the previous hit, the quality of the player's experience can often be lost. The assumption is that with stunning graphics and immersion, the player will ignore holes in the story's plot, ignore the rough details, or the repetition of cliches. Faults in the quality of the player's experience are expected to be considered unimportant in the wake of unforgettable graphics. While in practice, many players may ignore inconsistencies in the narrative and storytelling to focus on the visual experience, I think that regardless of who you are, games that fall into this trap of visuals over the overall experience leave players feeling empty. While Poppy Playtime may seem revolutionary based on its visual graphics, the storytelling falls flat, and when you take away the facade of Unreal Engine assets, the plot is shallow and, at its core, unoriginal. So then, how is Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion any better when I acknowledge that almost half of the cast of the entire franchise is based on or taken from other horror franchises? Isn't that the definition of unoriginality? Yes, it is, but Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion isn't trying to be original. Games like Poppy Playtime market their entire existence around their individuality as a franchise and utilize Unreal graphics to support that image. However, at their core, they are just retellings of already done tropes. Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion is a game based on irony. It was never created with the intention of being the next best thing. It was never created under the economic pressures of a larger business. For Spookies, engagement didn't equal profit, engagement equaled engagement. The entirety of Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion is based on tropes: a failed lab experiment, an evil school spirit, a haunted house, but the game recognizes this. The game's tendency to not take itself very seriously is what makes the game so seriously appealing. So when the game does take itself seriously, it makes those moments even more special. In particular, I'm referring to the two sequels of Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion, Karamari Hospital, made in 2015, and The Dollhouse, made in 2020. These DLCs expand on the lore of Spooky's Mansion and its characters without breaking the aesthetic value and kitsch concept of the original game. The major difference gameplay-wise between the DLCs and the base game is that the goal of reaching 1,000 rooms is lost. Both of the DLCs play more like a traditional game where you are in a confined setting and you must find a way to escape, but in the process, learn more about the story behind Spooky herself and the mansion. While these games definitely take inspiration from other games and franchises, to my knowledge, both the cast and the environments of the games were designed and executed originally by Akuma Kira and AMG Shina and Associates. Karamari Hospital takes place in Karamari Hospital, a drab, modern clinic that turns into a nightmare when the lights are turned off. The Dollhouse takes place in a, you guessed it, dollhouse with an elegant Victorian facade that hides the horrors of a brutalist laboratory. While both of these games show the creative power of their creators, they also stay true to the irony of the original game. In Karamari Hospital, you survive against brutalized patients and a deformed officer a la Silent Hill. In The Dollhouse, you face onslaughts of gored baby dolls and even an enigmatic demon clown. These games, while serving an original story, do not shy away from recognizing their use of cliches and tropes. The existence of a "oh, but of course" moment makes both of these games fun and endearing while still being scary. A little parody never hurt anybody, and oftentimes it can actually strengthen, through irony, the message of a video game. Another lesson that can be learned from Spooky Jumpscare Mansion in the wake of commercial horror games is the power of restrictions. A large budget is a wonderful thing to have in game production. It opens the door to many opportunities in the creation that small-time developers simply don't have access to. Many fantastic horror games came from large budgets, like the recent Silent Hill F. However, a large budget can negatively impact a video game's creativity. While large budget productions, as I mentioned earlier, can have stunning graphics, those graphics tend to lack ingenuity. Smaller budgets and other restrictions force creators to find shortcuts or use alternative methods to reach a certain goal, and those shortcuts tend to work in a game's favor rather than impeding it. Aside from spookies, a good example of this is the fog in Silent Hill, a game franchise I realize I'm bringing up a lot. In the first game, released in 1999, the classic fog that would carry into the future games was actually a product of storage restrictions in the technology of the time. Without getting too technical, also because I'm not sure I understand it fully myself, the fog reduced rendering distance, which in turn reduced the amount of bytes being used on loading and visualizing the map. This allowed for the creators of Silent Hill to implement the level of graphics and detail that they wanted while still staying within what was reasonable for technology of the time. Back to Spookies, according to Akuma Kira, the game was made with a budget of 0. All of it was made with the will and passion of its creators. This lack of budget results in less stunning graphics, but graphics that are quirky and sometimes claustrophobic as a product of their simplicity. The simplicity of the graphics serves the overall effect of the game, and the simplicity, while being a style choice, could also relate to the restrictions placed on the design process. So, what is the message of Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion? Aside from its message on guilt, present in the game's plot, Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion serves as a timeless reminder of the potential games have when separated from commercial expectations, or really, a lesson on what games can do even with commercial expectations. You can enjoy any game you want. That's purely based on perception. You may find Poppy Playtime riveting. Hell, you may even find Garden of Banban riveting, although I find that questionable. The goal of this video is not to raise pitchforks against businesses being businesses. However, I think we do need to be critical of the media we consume in the rise of commercial copies and clear cash grabs. Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion serves as a reminder that in our day and age, we've kind of lost the plot. You don't need to have the next best graphics to make an immersive game. You don't need to have the biggest budget to make an effective story. You don't need to have the most original plot. There may be an element of those things in commercial goods and their marketing, sure, but those things don't make a game memorable. A game being memorable is based on the player's experience, and even if you have photorealistic maps, Troy Baker on the mic, no hate to Troy Baker, and in theory a tragic tale of innocence falling to evil, you can still have a game that ends up feeling hollow. Sometimes a bit of parody works. A bit of humor works. Crappy graphics as a product of a low budget works. And while you may not have Troy Baker, feeling the passion and seeing the errors of a first-time game makes for a memorable gaming experience. Thus, I love Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion, even with its crappy cardboard cutout slimes.